All right, guys, it is noon. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this week's Crisis Jam. I'm Laura Evans, AVP of Public Policy and Government Affairs at Vibrant Emotional Health. And I am so thrilled to be your host for today, episode 215, with a fireside chat with our special guest, Eric Hipple, to be moderated with Dr. Chuck, and it is titled Real Men and Suicide. So, very important topic for us today. We are so honored to have this conversation. But before we get to that, again, we're going to review our housekeeping items. Please remember to stay on mute if you are not speaking. That is our one main rule. Other than that, please do change that speaker view so you can see who is speaking instead of gallery. That's going to be your top right corner in Zoom. Join in. Please share your thoughts, your comments, your questions, your perspective in the chat, and participate, right? Reply to the hot seat questions. We've got 2 today, so we want to hear from you. We want to test your knowledge. But other than that, guys, not a lot of rules. So let's keep this Zoom safe and fun, and we'll have a really great jam. Another feature for those who would like to use ASL, it should be maybe your bottom right corner. It is for me. In Zoom, there's a more feature. So if you go to more, you can bring the interpreters directly to your screen. They are also pinned or will be brought forward for you. Again, gallery view doesn't help so much, but if you have it in speaker view and you go to more, you can get that feature going for you should you want or need it. So there have been over 538 unique speakers across 214, now 15 episodes since 2020 for this Crisis Jam. So many topics, as I mentioned, I learn something new every week. If you have a topic, if you have an idea, if you have a different perspective, please feel free to bring that forward, put it in the chat, reach out to the organizers, and we can make sure that we get that topic featured. And you could find yourself here on this list. This is the list of 538 speakers, including our featured presentation today. Eric Hipple highlighted there. But if you don't see your name, and even if you see your name, maybe you know great colleagues who have information to share. Let's keep this list growing because there's so much that we can learn from each other in the crisis space. So remember to go to talk.crisisnow.com, bookmark it if you don't already have it. Here, there are different ways that you can participate in the 988 Learning Jam community. Now, we know that you can be here on Zoom Live with us every week. It's also available on YouTube following the weekly jam. But now we have a new option, and it's live streaming. So this is live streamed on YouTube at the same time it's happening if you are not able to join Zoom for any reason. So please share this with your colleagues, those who may not have access to Zoom or whose Zoom may be monitored. You can now access this educational opportunity on YouTube via live streaming. And again, make sure you sign up for the newsletter. You can register for the Zoom. You can share that link because it does have to be unique to you and your email. Make sure folks are registered so that they can get in no problems. We've got virtual backgrounds. We've got past materials, everything that you need. Again, talk.crisisnow.com. Put that on your bookmarks. And again, you can access the entire last week's Zoom or other Zooms, but you can also find the various components that you like. And then if we even go to the YouTube catalog, we've got color-coded past jams. So you can see if you want that debate, you've got those debates highlighted with that bright neon top line. We've got fireside chats that are there in orange. We've got moving the world's soul on suicide featured. Anything and everything that you want across these past 5 years of Zoom jams, we've got it on there. And again, if you have ideas for topics and debates, please share them. The debate that's going to come up 2 debates from now is actually one that was shared by Krista Hauserman from Michigan. So again, I think this is a great way for us to hear varying perspectives on one topic, and you get to decide. So the next upcoming debate, that's going to be episode 217, 2 weeks from now, or 2 Zooms from now. We will have a debate on if states should enact a 988 fee. We've got Hannah Wazalowski from NAMI taking the affirmative that is a great idea for states to enact, very similar to how 911 is funded. And we've got Tom Betlock taking the opposite position that a fee isn't the only way to do it, and states can use other mechanisms. So this is going to be, I think, a very timely debate. And then after that, this is Krista's idea. So thank you, Krista. Crisis facilities, should they require parents to stay with their children or minor or young people or whoever they may be providing care for during a crisis episode? So we've got Gwenda Summers taking that affirmative position. If you've got ideas for who can take that opposite position, welcome that. Always, again, taking good ideas. And then the next debate after that one, debate number 9, it's coordinating follow-up services in crisis situations. And do they require high-tech software solutions? Again, another great topic, and we're looking for people who are willing to join in that debate. So in addition to the debates, we've got live and on location. These are where the jam is hosted live on site. I think our first one will be in Columbus, Ohio, or the next one, I should say, in June. That's in the chat. And you'll see here, Columbus is putting a lot of money. This is the ADAM board for Franklin County, which that's their alcohol, drug, and mental health board. Oh, nearly $60 million in community investment. And I'm not just saying that as a Buckeye in Ohio. And this state is rocking and rolling and has been since my time at Vibrant back in 2020, saying, hey, you guys had, at the time, 13 crisis centers, but they're really investing in just everything across the crisis continuum, crisis stabilization. Again, a new facility that should have 60 recliners, 16 inpatient beds. Kudos to Ohio. Boo, Michigan. That was just for you, Chuck. But of course, Michigan's also doing great things. And thank you, Krista, for those ideas. What's going on in the news cycle? There is a lot of chatter around a leaked government document that suggests that the 988 suicide hotline press 3 option for LGBT youth will be defunded. So that link is in the chat. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that that line is still currently in operation as usual. But of course, we'll hear more on the federal side when we get to that section. And then SAMHSA has released additional assets around helping folks to understand when to use 988, when to use 911. And at the center of that is that whole person care. So just some really amazing graphics. Thank you to the SAMHSA communications team. Also want to shout out MJ New Jersey. I know you all did a lot of work on this early on as well. But essentially, you know, medical emergency, fire, crime in progress, life-threatening situations, you'll see there in that bubble. That's more of a 911. 988, mental health and substance use support, suicide prevention and crisis de-escalation, connection to local care, treatment resources. Again, the center of this is how are we serving that whole person, getting folks what they need when they need it. So very excited. We're going to review some of the graphics that are in this toolkit that has been released by SAMHSA. About half of the graphics today. Make sure you tune in next week because we will go through the other half. And again, you'll see these are just really great, amazing, clear images. And particularly when we talk about some of the populations that SAMHSA has outlined as high risk, it does include older men as a high-risk population, rural individuals as a high-risk population. So kudos to their team again for creating graphics that can really resonate and show the full spectrum of individuals who may be impacted. All right, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to David Covington to walk us through the lived experience library for this week.
Laura, thanks so much. And Laura, thank you so much to you personally for your ongoing support, commitment, and engagement leadership. You've just been such a terrific host and led us in so many of these programs. And thanks to HHS, to Brian Heppard and the NASBA team. So the Lived Experience Library, we're not going to bring the authors forward today at this point because they're the featured presentation and Joe will be at 2 other points in the program, including the roundtable. But I want to just remind us of this series where we're bringing these really vital authors and stories to the table. It's what inspired us to make the documentary and now trying to make this new one around moving the world's soul on suicide, really going back to William Styron's Darkness Visible, opening the gates for these kinds of positive stories, the courage to talk about pain, to talk about recovery. And in particular, we've been going through and bringing authors to the table. Today, we've got Silouan again with us, who was on previously for Who Am I? And check out, I've got it up here on my, it's too far to reach, Real Men Do Cry. It's in the upper right, Eric Hipple's story, which we're going to hear a lot more about, and Defying the Enemy Within from Joe Williams. And next week, we hope to have Josh Riverdale, The Gospel According to Josh. So we're working through all of these over the next couple of years, Laura.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the work that you and your team does to put this on every week. Really appreciate it. So that takes us to our first hot seat, guys. This week we have the entire jam that is on the hot seat. So I want to see that chat filled up, and I want to see folks participating when we bring up the poll. So the question is, we've got the great Eric Hipple on today. He made his iconic NFL debut on Monday Night Football in 1981. And he threw 4 touchdown passes in a breakout performance. 4. So which team did he pummel? Was it America's team, the Dallas Cowboys? Was it the Bears? Was it the San Francisco 49ers or the New York Jets? Make sure we get in here, team. And perhaps, I don't know if this can be overstated, but Eric, if I could ask before we reveal the answer, how common is that for folks to throw 4 touchdown passes in one game, in a debut game?
Well, it was a magical night, first of all, and not only did I throw 4 touchdown passes, but I also ran for 2 touchdowns. So it was even bigger than that. So it was pretty magical. It was one of those games where just everything laid out just perfect. And in fact, I remember when the game was over, I almost had this feeling like, well, that was easy. It wasn't. That's a night, I don't know what I was anticipating, but when everything just flowed perfectly. So that's how it happens. Everybody just does their job really, really well.
Yes, well, much respect. We love when that happens, when all the magic comes to. Well, I think we are ready to reveal the answer. We love it when the magic comes. The audience says it's 42% Chicago Bears. And that's right. So it is remembered as one of the most electrifying Bears game debut in Monday Night Football history. And Eric, if you could just very briefly maybe tee us up for this clip that we're going to watch.
So yeah, it was a game down in Tampa. We played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Tampa was known for their hard hitting. They played zone behind everything, so once you cross the line of scrimmage, you were going to get hit. And this happened to be a scramble where I kept the ball. It was a pass play, but everybody was covered, so I held on to it. And I thought I'd be kind of a guy that would stay in bounds and get that extra yards, and it turned out to be a really poor decision. Because the rules back then were so much different than they are today. You could actually hit a guy, you could hit his head, you could hit him, close to the out of bounds line. You could hit a quarterback, anytime basically. So there was no hands off on the quarterbacks, and so this dramatic play where I got hit underneath the chin, and my helmet went flying, and the ball went another direction. I went spinning and landed on my back, and it was a tough hit.
That was a tough hit. That was a tough hit. And we're going to hear more from you when we come to the roundtable. But we've got our second question now that we've teed up based on your book, Real Men Do Cry. And you reflect back on beliefs that shaped your early understanding of what it meant to be strong. So we're going to ask the entire Zoom. So I want to see that chat lit up, and please participate in this. What is the lesson that Eric describes learning from an early age that strength meant what? Did it mean being a provider no matter the cost, always putting family first, never showing pain or asking for help, or winning at all costs? So again, that toughness that we just saw from Eric, what beliefs did he have early on that helped shape this belief? All right, and for those of you who said C, never showing any pain or asking for help. You are right. And in his keynote at AAS in 2014, Eric talks about that myth and how the loss of his son and own suicide attempt challenged that myth. So we're going to hear more from Eric as well as Joe. But now I'm actually going to turn it over to Dr. Chuck, who's going to lead the fireside chat with Eric. Dr. Chuck.
Thanks, Laura. Hey, Eric.
How are you doing? Good to see you.
Doing great. Privileged to see you again, and wincing watching that video of you taking that hit on the sideline. As a former quarterback, like I told you before, I've never gotten a hit quite like that. That was brutal. And today, as I introduce you and as we're going to have this chat, I really wanted to be able to kind of honor for us in the learn community to hear someone who's been so tough and gone through some of these successful things in the NFL, but what you've been through in your life, an unimaginable loss, and what you did with that in terms of the grief and your growth and recovery, and then turning that into advocacy and a system changer. I think it's really relevant to our learning community at the Crisis Jam and what we do in crisis. So Eric, as you know, played NFL quarterback for the Detroit Lions, but now works with the NFL, veterans, schools, sports organizations, multiple different advocacy groups, University of Michigan Depression Center, and everything in my contact and work with you, Eric, is about making mental health and substance use more visible, more accessible, working on taking away stigma and those kinds of things. I think it's a really powerful lesson for us. So I really appreciate you being here for our community. My first question would be, in your book and in your speaking, you've been open about what it was like when your 15-year-old son, Jeff, died of suicide. And could you at least share with our community what we would like to know and help us to understand about that experience, what it meant to you, how it affected those next steps in your journey, as we're going to kind of take a walk through that briefly today?
Well, it actually, it all came together in a point where, the pain and the loss and the guilt that went along with it. And I say guilt because I'd gone through these mindsets myself. I had depression, missed a whole quarter of school when I was in college. My mom had, but you know what? We never talked about that stuff. So I really never had a foundation of what was wrong with me. And so when he was starting to go through this stuff, it almost kind of painted over it and said, well, I couldn't believe a 15-year-old, even though I had gone through that myself, could be having these thoughts and going through this. And so it was a slap, a wake up, trauma, everything all at once. It made me realize, though, that suicide for me is now off the table because I realized in that moment, looking at his body in the morgue, that, the pain that's left behind when somebody dies by suicide, all those that's opposite of the mindset you have when you're thinking about taking your life. You're thinking about, everybody else will be better off without you. So it's almost like you're thinking of, I'll sacrifice myself so everybody else will be better off. And I can get rid of this pain myself. And so that's how I'm going to fix the problem. But when you experience somebody else close to you or a loved one that dies by suicide, you realize how much pain that is left behind. And so I took that off the table. That's one thing I won't do anymore. But it left me in this troubled place where then how do I manage, this pain that I've got, but also, all the grief and everything that was going on with it. How do I manage it? And I just started turning to tools that I'd always used, in the past for being mentally tough. I'll say, like this, when you deal with it the way you do to get through. And that meant alcohol, that meant drugs, that meant, prescription medications, anything I could really get my hands on just to be numb and not have to feel that, but without taking my life. So that was the track that started pushing me down.
Thank you for sharing that. What you went through, and your book is just amazing at being able to share the vulnerability of what you did, and the title, like Real Men Do Cry, and coming from your background and coming from the background, and this is true, I think, for football players in different groups, military, and I'm sure more construction workers. There's groups that I'm sure I'm missing in including that. But for you, what does Real Men Do Cry mean?
Well, it's actually a playback onto what I used to think mental toughness was. Mental toughness, I always thought as a physical thing, that, to go through something, then it has to be something physical. And you play the quarterback, and so you understand the leadership position too, is like when people look up to you and the feel in the huddle off the field. They're looking for strength. They're looking for that. So to me, it meant anything that comes my way, I can stand it. Physically, run to the wall, I'll do it. Play with pain, I'll play with it. Even play with injury at times. But that's what it was all about. And then the book was about realizing that, no, mental toughness is about be able to maintain your mental health, when these traumatic things happen to us. And the fact that crying is a piece of that. And it has to be a part of that, because that vulnerability and being able to get in tune with those emotions is a great part of trying to get better. The understanding that this is a natural reaction to something that's traumatic, and that one of the way through it is a process through that. And so crying is a normal thing. And men don't want to show it, they don't want to hide it. And I get that, but there's also a need for it, and there's a time and a place.
Tell me about that part in your journey of recovery. Where did that come to you as you were talking about being numb and then move into that place of those realizations?
Well, some of it came from, the idea of grief, and so how do you grieve properly? Because I guarantee you, I would say you don't really know how to grieve properly until you actually talk to somebody, especially in a traumatic event or something like that has to do with, complex trauma or complex, grief that you end up in. It's more than just the loss itself. It is also the loss and the grief of everything in the future, everything that you're going to have together, so all that is lost as well. And every time you come across something during the daytime that can make you cry, instead of being embarrassed in front of it, learning how to manage that, you can still cry, but learning how to manage it so it's not surprising you and catching you off guard. And that was a big part of that. But then, going in through therapy and talking about the emotional part of it, that those things are real. And the more we are in tune with that emotion and where it comes from, because we basically all start with some sort of body sensation, but where does it come from and what do we do with that? Because managing that and understanding it is like the first step into something that you realize is better than the maladaptive thing that you're doing.
Thanks, Eric. You took that growth and recovery and it shifted into advocacy, like we talked about in the introduction. As you've been working with the NFL and other groups to help improve systems, specifically with suicide prevention, but also with mental health and substance use, what are some learned lessons that us as a learning community about crisis care and evolution of crisis care could learn?
I think one of them is to realize that through certain transitions in our lifetime, okay, and it could be something traumatic, it could be a relationship breakup, it could be something where it just changes the status quo. It can put a lot of stress on us, and if we're already vulnerable to being influenced by a stress or some pressure that's going on, it's very easy to kind of slip, into that crisis thinking, which is, alcohol, drugs, isolation, all those things you think about. And so one of the things that I realized, when going through transition, especially men, we try and fix it. We'll try and protect the family. We'll try and protect it, our position. And I realized that going through that, that's not really a great thing, right? So my stuff ended up, of course, when I got arrested for a DUI and ended up doing jail time. And I think every person has some sort of moment when everything comes down to bear, and all of a sudden you face yourself and say, "Hey, I'm part of the equation. I'm part of it. And so if I'm going to change something, it's got to come within as well. I can ask for help, but if I'm not ready for it as well, it's not going to do me much help." And so I think those two things have to come together pretty well. And they seem to be the direction I've been going down and am in is it's got to be at that point in time when that person is ready. And so you have to have something available for them at that point in time. Because if we say, well, it's going to take you 6 weeks before I get to you, then, I've missed that point in time, and I'm going to stay maybe the same thing I'm doing that I've been adapting with, which is not good, drinking too much and something, or getting worse, problems that happen. And so, I think that urgent care is so important to be able to get in front of somebody that might not say, okay, here's your hospital stay, but I can talk to you right now. And I love the whole 988 concept and how it's working with the urgent behavioral care model, is because that's there for that urgent moment when you need it. And so you don't have to wait till you get arrested. You don't have to wait until your family's broken up. You don't have to wait until you lost everything. It's something I can talk to somebody now. And I just think that's such an important piece.
So immediate access being a
Immediate
huge
access.
part of that. Yeah.
Immediate access where there's not hurdles to it. You don't have to, the pay schedule, you don't have to worry about insurance. It's now. And it can be a phone call, or it can be showing up face-to-face person. It can be many different ways, but it's available.
As you know, when we talked about Eric, one of my groomsmen is a 13-year NFL veteran starter, and he shared with me some of his feelings about the evolution of support for players and veterans in the NFL. You talked about they didn't used to protect us quarterbacks on the sideline or getting hit in the head, but when it's related to care and mental health care and support for NFL veterans, what things give you hope about this moment of creating it, making it able to overcome the stigma about reaching out for help, and how do you see that happening in the NFL? And then maybe I might follow up with some of the other organizations that you've been in touch with.
Well, there's been some people that have been involved in that, and I'm one of them that have really pushed us very hard on. And it came from when I was working at University of Michigan Depression Center. We were doing some research on former NFL players with the cooperation of the NFL Players Association, and we found that everybody had problems with this transition. That it becomes a mental health issue, and a lot of problems that people were having and reporting were mental health issues, right? They came back as reporting as, well, it must be a head injury, must be a head injury. And so we had guys coming forward saying, oh yeah, I'm having all these problems, but it's because of a head injury. So the stigma was still there about mental health, and getting that crossover point. So the NFL started looking at what's going on. There's been some people, Bardos, I think he's been, part of the NFL alumni, and also crisis intervention. I think he's on the crisis intervention board, but he being up front, being outspoken, pushing the ball forward. And the NFL's been making some changes along the way. So we reach out and do connection. Detroit Lions in themselves, 10 years ago, when we were going through this, I brought together a peer-to-peer outreach group for the alumni to reach out to alumni or young players when they first transition out. And so that connection, so we're still connected. And I think being connected, regardless of where you were or what you did, being connected, so it's not just a drop off the face of the earth and you're ostracized and can't talk to anybody anymore where you used to be, but you're still part of the group. And I think that's really important. And that's the way it's been pushing it and getting so access. They made access available, and psychiatric care available and for free, for players.
Eric, I love that thought. You used two major words, access and connected. I think back, we had Morgan Shields on here a few weeks ago talking about the type of feelings or situations that people get when they're in crisis and they seek help, and how important it is to create environments that create connectedness. And I think when we get to the panel, that's going to be an overarching thing. I know Silouan works a lot in first responder groups, and in a similar type of culture of this toughness and maybe hesitancy to reach out, but very open to reach out within peers comparatively. And it's that feeling of connectedness that creates that. So I think that's an element as we continue to evaluate our systems, that those elements are built in there to make it easier to do that. And it sounds like that's happening within the NFL pieces that you've been working with. Now, you have been getting involved in the crisis world, I know. I'm really looking forward to you being in part of the tour group that shows off the Franklin County site and the work that they're doing there in that area. What are you seeing in the developments and the things that are happening with 988 and other pieces of the crisis world over the past several years? What are the things that you're hopeful about? Any cautions or experiences that you've had in working in other systems that you've been developing for us to take heed to?
I think, well, and this is such an interesting position to be in, because I've been fighting so hard on the other end of it, not even knowing that's what we've been doing on that side of it, right? Because of my own realm, the University of Michigan, the National Network of Depression Centers came together, and they all came together. But it was more about sharing research more than it was about clinical delivery, right? And so even though maybe the research would go there, but those things have been available. But there's so many disconnected pieces to our medical healthcare system that's really hard. I get calls all the time. What do I do? Who do I go see? And it's always at a crisis time when that happens. And if you don't have a place to go to, then you're going to lose somebody. And so I think why I was thinking in that way when I came down to Phoenix, to go through a tour there of RI International and the partners, and I was blown away. I mean, here's something that in my mind I've had a dream of something like that happening for not only myself when I was having trouble, but for my son when he was having trouble, for the myriad of people that I've worked with in professional sports that were having problems, or executives having problems. I was just down in New Mexico at an open pit coal mine, to all their employees. I mean, which is stressful. I mean, so it's not just there. It is vast and it's wide. The many people that can actually use this really, and so that connection, like you said, is one, and timing is very important. And so as I've gone through this and seen it happen, I'm just so excited. And and what the future holds, I think it's going to be very bright. This model is fantastic.
Thank you, Eric. We're excited about it too. But I tell you what, the two big keys that you've emphasized, and David mentioned in the chat about so many disconnected pieces, is there's this, creating access, and then when you do get that access to care, it feeling connective. And it's not just about men or football players or tough things. It's so many different groups that go through those same elements. And how do we make that inclusive for everyone that's going through that? On that note, and I know this is very important to you because of what you've gone through in your family. Can you talk a little bit about crisis and access and connectedness and how lessons learned about for youth and working with children and those groups and some of the work that you do?
Well, I believe that information is very important to have, and it doesn't have to be a scholarly information about, a clinical, setting of what you're looking at when you're looking at your own mental health. But it certainly has to be that, what are the key points of it? One is being connected. One is having a community, so you got your support. It's having relationships, so somebody that you can respond to. It's also having a purpose, so those things are all part of that connectedness. But when you start talking about peers, I mean, you can say, well, it's great. I've got a bunch of football peers. Okay. We have military peers. So they have peers for themselves, so they may be able to know how to talk to each other. But really, quite frankly, you also have peers that are because of addiction peers. You have peers that are because of mental health issue peers. And so when you put those two things together, it can be very powerful, because now not only do you have somebody you can speak to that lives my life, but you also have somebody who's very well educated in what's going to happen next in my mental health, and somebody that I can be vulnerable with and share with. But like I said, it doesn't have to be within your realm of that niche of just only your people. It can be because of what you're going through. That could be a peer to what you're going through. So you get, grief support groups. You get, support groups with addiction. And I think those are very important because you have to have somebody to relate to.
How about for your book, Eric? Any particular quotes that especially speak to you that you'd feel would be helpful to share with us?
Well, I had at one point in time, that's not a story, but it says, so I got this thing here. It says, be still and know that it's actually Psalm 48:10, right? And I looked at this thing for the longest time after going through some therapy that really, really helped me out. And this had to be with unconditional self-acceptance stuff. Because I was one that's always turned against myself. Like, I'm a failure. I'm no good if it wasn't perfect. And so I kind of broke it down a little bit and deconstructed it and put it, so just be still and know that I am. And I left it there. And I actually had it tattooed right here. So I think that be still and know who I am. So know who you are, be comfortable with who you are. For me, the clear definition of mental health is being able to be, a state of well-being. In other words, so you're comfortable with who you are in your skin. A lot of us don't have that. You're able to, handle normal stresses. You're able to be, part of community. You're able to be in healthy relationships, and you can handle, no stress. But and you have a sense of yourself, right? Where that you can appreciate in your life, and that means acceptance of not only bad things that I do, I accept those. I make mistakes because I can learn from it. As long as I accept it, I can learn from it. And then, of course, accepting the good things that we do too, because I think, often people don't do that. They don't recognize that, hey, this was a positive thing that I did for something, and just say that was good because, it gives us gratitude. And I know two things can't exist at one time, and that's, hate and gratitude. They don't exist in this, they don't coexist. You got one or you got the other. And so I think gratitude is a huge, huge piece of that.
Well, Eric, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate doing this chat. We could go on for another 15 or 20 minutes covering different things, but the themes that you shared with us are so relevant to things we've been talking about for 200 plus episodes, but seeing it in the lens of a specific demographic or group that you've worked with and have worked with is so applicable. And it's about, like you said, having access to be able to get help when you need it. But then access of something that feels really connective. And then the third thing you talked about being still. And when people are in crisis, creating environments that make it easier to be still and to be able to work on those things and to be to get through the distress and the things that you're feeling in that. And the last piece, and it was one of your quotes in the book, was talking about just that mentality of that you used to have of just we should be able to suck it up and kind of move forward type thing. I've heard Vic Armstrong talk about that growing up in the culture of his church. And so these are universal messages that go through different groups that we have to keep working from a stigma perspective to overcome that and make it easy to get help. But then when people reach out for help, we got to make it the right kind of help. So they want to keep doing that. So appreciate your time. And I'm excited about getting in this roundtable. I want to sign off, Laura. Thanks.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dr. Chuck, and thank you, Eric, for that conversation. It was really amazing and just so many good quotes and appreciation in the chat. So I hope you take some time to take a look at that because sharing your story is so important. And thank you, Dr. Chuck, for bringing out those themes because I think another theme of gratitude, again, crosses cultures and just reminds us to, again, be still and know ourselves. So we've got an amazing roundtable. I'm going to bring those folks in. We've got Silouan Green, who I mentioned before, was the first storyteller from Moving America's Soul and Suicide, a veteran, author, speaker. Really excited to have Silouan on the roundtable. And then we saw Joe Williams from the pre-show, the clip for Moving the World's Soul and Suicide. Joe Williams is a former rugby player, boxer, proud Aborigine, and hopefully I've gotten that right. Speaker, author, and also it's 2 a.m. I believe in his side of the world. So I also want to thank you, Joe, for being here very early. So I'm going to ask both of our roundtable participants to maybe just reflect on that fireside chat. Joe or Silouan, whoever wants to share first.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Silouan. What struck out and, Chuck pointed it out is just the importance of connection. And then I think also within that piece, the purpose part of that, I think sometimes when you're lost, one thing I wanted to ask Eric about was sort of finding himself after he left the NFL. Cause I know just as someone who was a kid when he played, I mean, he had a lot of injuries and, what happens to that part of you? Like, how do you find yourself after that? And who are the people that helped them along? Because I think that's a typical journey kind of everybody has. And, one thing I've noticed over the years, whether it was, from my own experience or, men and women that I've met along the way, even when you get to the point where you decide, maybe I want to live, maybe I want to not die, you still are left with the question of like, who am I? What am I going to do now? And I think that's why connection is so important because sometimes that answer can be hard to find yourself. But when you're in a group of people that you connect with, and as Eric said, it could be, you have the common occupation or you have the common addiction or you have the common sense of loss, that you surround yourself around those people. They can help you find those answers. And I think the last thing I would say would just be, I would love to see mental health in general, the mental health community in general, get really focused on helping people find what's next. Now that we've given you some tools, now that we've helped you through crisis, how are we going to help you build your life? How are we going to help you find something that really fits with you, that you're going to live, you're going to find that identity, you're going to find that next thing? Because from my experience, long term, you have to have that. Or you're just going to keep falling back, needing more and more tools. I'm
Thank you
looking.
so.
I'm looking at
Oh,
the I'm looking at the questions here, but yeah, I'm waiting for for Joe to come on if he was able to get on.
Joe, do you want to share your thoughts on that roundtable?
Yeah, for sure. Like there was so much similarities in that from Eric. Just around, I think being a First Nations man, an Aboriginal man down here in Australia, um, so much of who we have been for thousands of years, documented as the oldest existence of humankind here in Australia, as far as human beings goes, or I guess the existence of it, and that we're talking about thousands and thousands of years. I think it's 120,000. The latest day, the date is at this point. But talking about there's so much similarities in what Eric was saying as to who we were for thousands of years, and the reasons why the incredible rates around suicide, the incredible rates around addiction, the incredible rates around homelessness, the incredible rates around all the different challenges in our communities around the same type of thing, right? Disconnected purpose, not knowing who we are as far as identity goes, struggling with our community of who we are. There's a brilliant, brilliant book. I always reflect on with everything that I do as far as speaking goes. A book called Lost Connections, with by Johan Hari, and he just talks about how the world is just so disconnected. And when we look at disconnection of people, we look at disconnection of communities, we look at disconnection of purpose. It makes complete sense why we're so unwell as people. So looking at and talking with listening to what Eric was saying around disconnected people, disconnected pieces, and finding purpose. I guess as a former sports person as well, so many people struggle post career because our entire identity is around the sport we do without going, well, that's just the job. That's just part of who we were for, that's not who we are. It's part of who we were for a long period of our time. And like anyone who has a job, yeah, we get paid, great money, and we put our bodies in all sorts of different places. But when we come to the realization that it's just part of our life, it's not who we are, it's not the complete identity of who we are, then we can find purpose in other things. And I always talk about the three P's: people, purpose, and place. When you have people, you got a community. When we have purpose, that gives you the what's next. And then when you have place, you're grounded in who you are with that identity in that connectedness to that place. So for me, I think post career and reflecting, on what Eric was saying is just so prominent to the world's challenges in and around this space of diagnosis, behaviors, is just we are so disconnected as people. We don't have a true identity of who we are as human beings, and that's, I believe, the core issue of challenges that we have in so many communities. And you know, Eric was reflecting on a sports career. I can sit here on the other side of the world, albeit at 2:45 in the morning, but reflect on the exact same things in a different part of the world, but are the very same challenges that so many people are faced with post sports career and just posting community.
Yes, thank you for that. You all have shared so much. And if I could, maybe ask a question that I had, and also I think came up in the chat, is when we think about some behaviors that, we adapt that could be, not very helpful, maladaptive for us. One common thing I'm hearing, either in certain occupation or in a career of sport, is reliance on alcohol. I know for rugby, that's a very much a component of the sport. Socials afterwards. Eric, you also mentioned that for football, and it is very prominent in certain professions as well. Can you all talk about maybe in trying to find community, how those maladaptive behaviors were encouraged, and then how you all moved through that, and then other ways to find the purpose and connection without those maladaptive behaviors.
Well, I think one thing that's tough is that, especially with the community I work with a lot, which is first responders in the military, alcohol being abused is bad, but a lot of what happens with the alcohol isn't bad. Like, that's the way that a lot of guys all get together and they talk and they sit around a fire. And what can happen is, you see this a lot, somebody gives that up and then they lose all of it. Like, to not be around the alcohol, they don't go to the campfire anymore, or to not be around the alcohol, they don't go to the bar at the end of the shift anymore. And then not only do they lose the bad thing, which is too much alcohol, but they also lose the good thing. And a lot of times it's learning new behaviors, new habits, new ways to, find connection. And I think that doesn't get spoken of enough, that you're losing something when you quit drinking. It ain't just the bad stuff. Unless obviously you're drinking alone, that's not good, but a lot of it starts in that culture. And so I think that just leads to a discussion, like how do you find that connection when you lose that element of it? 'Cause it can be hard for people.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We do have to move forward. Please feel free though, Eric, Joe, Silouan, please, there's lots of questions in the chat. Please put additional thoughts, comments, questions there. Just so powerful, so moving. Thank you all for participating today. And I think, Joe, you're going to come back and join us later on. But right now, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Brian Hepburn in Nashville for an update from the States.
Thank you, Laura. That was a really great discussion. Thank you to Eric and Chuck and Silouan and Joe. Real men do cry. That was excellent discussion. One of the things that also makes me think of is VIPs and how being a VIP, that can work against you, and it can also work for you. And maybe having more of a discussion on the VIP issue would be helpful. But reflecting on Eric with the grieving for his son, dealing with his own depression and suicidal feelings, reaching out to his community, being an advocate for other players, for other human beings to get help with the depression. I would just salute Eric and all the work that he's doing to be able to move beyond himself out into the community to make a difference. So thank you. I wanted to quickly say that NASHBID continues to work with states and territories to promote 988 and crisis services. Most states now are working on budget issues. There's a lot of concern about financial sustainability. They're looking at Congress and some of the decisions that are being made, and hope that the decisions will go in the direction of helping them with their financial sustainability. Want to thank the federal leadership for the support for 988 and crisis services over the last 6 years. It's made a huge difference. Prior to that, was a lot of work on beyond beds and really helping move the system forward so that people could get what they needed through community services. We have a long ways to go, but it's really impressive how far we have come. And I want to thank especially David Covington and his team and the federal leadership that has done so much to get us to this point. Wanted to quickly say that there are a couple of announcements. One is National Council next week, as many of you know, because you're going to the meeting. They'll be having their annual conference in Philadelphia. That looks to be fantastic. So I want to give a reach out to Chuck and Goglia and his team for doing such a great job with National Council. Also on May 15th, from 3 to 4 p.m., there's a conference on psychopharmacotherapy, pharmacotherapy focused on co-occurring bipolar disorder and opioid disorders. And I think someone is going to put that in the chat. So with that, thank you very much. And again, it's been an excellent session. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hepburn, for all the work you and your team do. We're so appreciative of just highlighting the needs of the state. So kudos to you and your team. And And then if you see your state here that has its name spelled out, that means your state has not been featured here on the Jam, and we want to change that. So folks from Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Arkansas, West Virginia, South Carolina, Vermont, Maine, you all are doing amazing work and we want to highlight it. So make sure that we get this to your colleagues in those states so we can highlight some of the great work that you all are doing. Again, if you've seen one state, you've seen one state, we can all learn from each other. So I'm going to turn it over now to Emily Feltrin for a federal update. Emily.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, providing an update this week. We do have a lot to share because the House and Senate are back from recess, but I will be brief as I know we're on a timeline, of course, of these wonderful packed crisis jams. We do expect a lot of action over the next few weeks at the federal level, looking at Congress in particular. The fiscal year 2026 appropriations process is ramping up, and deadlines to submit appropriations requests, including on 988, for those of you whose organizations may do that. We've had deadlines over the last couple of weeks and couple of months, and some deadlines coming up as well. We're also keeping an eye out on possible opportunities to support and submit written testimony to the Senate Labor Subcommittee and the Senate Appropriations Committee. I know folks on this call may do that on 988 as well. I also wanted to address the leaked draft of the president's budget proposal for fiscal year 2026 that some of us may have seen. It was reported widely in the press after it became public. It's known as a passback, provided information about proposed funding levels, and it goes back and forth between the agencies and the Office of Management and Budget, hence its name. It did include cuts for various programs, including elimination of some programs, also agencies and initiatives at HHS. So many of us I know are keeping a close eye on that. The passback did, though, include $519.6 million for 988, which is the same as fiscal year 25 and 24. So that was a bit of good news, although, as Laura said earlier on, it did include a proposed elimination of the LGBTQ plus specialized services. Just really briefly, another update on budget reconciliation, which I know my wonderful colleague Sarah talked a little bit about at our last federal update. Just as a reminder, this is a process used in Congress to expedite the passage of budgetary measures that affect taxes and programs. And we're keeping a close eye on possible impacts to Medicare and Medicaid. And we know the House and Senate will likely be considering updates and their reconciliation measures over the next couple of weeks and maybe months. House Energy and Commerce may even be holding a markup as early as next week. And this could have a significant impact on people with mental health conditions or substance use disorder, as 1 in 3 people with a mental health condition or SUD rely on Medicaid. So definitely important to keep an eye on what's happening there. One last update is that the House Energy and Commerce Committee yesterday advanced the SUPPORT Act, which I know many of us follow because it will re-up funding for programs focused on prevention and treatment and recovery for patients with SUD. And the bill did include language to protect 988 from cybersecurity incidents. So we'll keep a close eye on that as the SUPPORT Act moves forward, and certainly provide any further updates in this space as well. Thank you, Laura, for the opportunity to provide some updates, and I will hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Emily. We appreciate the work that you, AFSP, and other organizations do to uplift the crisis services needs within the federal budget. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Hepburn to talk through this week's crisis talk. Stephanie?
Thanks, Laura. So I'd love to bring Joe back on. And I was thinking, I was rereading the article featuring our conversation, and it just reminded me that you were 13 years old playing against adults, which that first concussion that you experienced at 13, you've shared with me that over time policy has changed. Do you think that policy has changed enough? I know time, sometimes the marker moves, but not enough. And I was just curious as to your thoughts about policy and protecting players that are playing rugby, whether that's children or adults.
There's a huge debate over here at the moment, because there has been a great deal of change as far as any top, because our sport, right, it's rugby league. So people might know rugby as rugby union, but we play rugby league. So 13 player aside, um, 80-minute game, limited interchange, all that sort of stuff. So when you're playing at a high speed, these athletes are in the gym, 4 and 5 days a week, professional sport, all of that. Um, Huge contact with, no pads, no helmets or anything like that. Um, huge contact, and at great speed as well.
Just the speaker now.
So
Okay.
there has been huge conversations at the moment, particularly in the media, because they're cracking down on a hell of a lot of head contact, and it's, I guess, the old school have a real problem with that, because um, there's a hell of a lot of stoppages in the game. There's, the referee, because we only have one referee, so the referee won't pick it up because of the game so fast, and then they'll use what they call the bunker, which is, I guess, some like a team elsewhere that watches just footage of the game. So they pick up late hits, they pick up headshots, they pick up players stumbling when they get up, and then, the player has to go off for a HIA, so a head injury assessment, and then there's, different gradings with that to have, automatic stand downs over a period of time and so forth. So there's a real discussion at the moment out here that it's having a huge impact on the game, and a lot of people aren't liking it. But for somebody whose head's a bit cooked, I go, we need this. Like, the people who have never played at that level don't understand it, and don't experience not picking up your kids because you forget to pick them up from school one day. Um, who don't have these experiences are really challenged with the way that the game's headed. But I just think it's an evolvement of the way that the game's headed at the moment, and it's around protecting it, the player. It's around. I also think there'll be a hell of a lot of lawsuits moving forward. And there's already a couple of different class actions that have been spoken about around this type of stuff. So there is a real momentum shift at the moment around policy, as you call it, but around just the way that the game is, the direction it's headed, just to protect the player a little bit, because there are, I think when we see it and we play this game, and the players are, incredibly tough. But we're seeing a hell of a lot of older players, 50, 60, 70s, that are all struggling with things like dementia and, these different type of, brain injury type uh, challenges later in their life. So there's a real shift at the moment. And if anyone, I guess, looks up what the NRL is about at the moment, the National Rugby League, there's a great deal of conversations around that, publicly, very publicly, because it's challenged a hell of a lot of the people who are watching the game. And even the players are getting frustrated with the way that it's going, because there's, I guess, some incidental things, like a player will slip over and then get contact with a head, and then they stop the game, they review the cameras, and then players will go off in the sin bin. So there's a real change around it at the moment. I don't think they've got it right, but I agree with the direction that they're going.
Thank you so much. And that's why your voice is so important, not just about mental health, but also on the policy side. Thank you so much, Joe. I'll pass it back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Joe. Again, just thank you for all of your work here. You, Eric, Silwan, everyone that's been featured. So important as we think about sports and mental health. And again, not just sports, but occupations and community and finding purpose. So appreciate you sharing your story here. So let's take a look at what's coming up next week. Episode 216, we've got Day in the Life. What is it like across the entire continuum? So part one, someone to contact. We've got our friends from Sherry Sinwelski from DD Hertz and Rachel McLaughlin, who will join us. And then I think the week after that, We are going to have that debate we talked about. Should states enact a 988 fee similar to a 911 fee? We've got Hannah taking the affirmative and Tom saying, hey, that's not the only option here. So make sure that you tune in for those conversations next week and the following week. Thank you all for joining us so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.